Hey, it's the podcast guy.
Sutton United Talk Time on podcast. It's the Sutton Podcast.
And there it is! Sutton United of the GM Vauxhall Conference have put out First Division Coventry City, winners of the FA Cup themselves less than 2 years ago. And what a moment to enjoy for the fans of this Surrey side. They've had their moments before, but never one like this.
But the whistle goes down. You like for Sutton United. Sutton United, the National League, are through to the last 16 of the FA Cup. No longer English football's perennial non-league club. A 123-year crescendo reaches a new peak for Sutton United, who are promoted to the Football League for the first time.
Hello and welcome back to another episode, another season of Sutton United Talk Time on podcast. It's the Sutton Podcast. Once again, I'm delighted to say that we're sponsored by Lucky Star Gin. As that intro just started, you could tell it's going to be the same old stuff. I can't get it right even in the intro, which I've done hundreds of times. I'm your host, Mike, and today we are taking a peek behind the amber curtain and we're going to be talking to Gary Otto. We're going to find out a little bit more about Gary and his hopes and expectations for this season and beyond, hopefully. And we, as always, lead with the engagement. Please do continue sharing, liking, retweeting, all the things you want to. Put your comments in and, just join in the conversation. It really, really is nice to see, and I do love it when people recommend the podcast to others. It freaks me out. I see someone say, listen to the podcast, and I'm like, oh, what podcast? And I talk about it's mine. Gary, thank you so much for joining us. We have tried a couple times, and then the timing is just kind of threw one of us off or the other off, or I think last season we just went, yeah, it's not a good time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But
I appreciate your patience and your perseverance on getting it together.
One of them was definitely me. I remember going, I can't do this. But we got there eventually.
Yes.
But for anyone who doesn't know you, people would have seen you around the place, would have heard your name. But can you tell us a little bit about your role at the club and kind of what your responsibilities include? Almost like your job description. It's not what I meant, but...
Yeah, that's a good question. I think basically I'm sort of behind the scenes guy. I don't have responsibility for day to day any longer, at least. So I sort of am in constant contact with Ben, who's doing most of the day to day work, with Tim, who's obviously the COO. With Matthew and Jack, who are doing the marketing and the commercial sponsorship, etc. So it's there's no specific one resposibility, but it sort of covers everything.
Okay.
if that makes sense.
And the constant contact, was that part of your sign up? Did you know? Did you expect that, or did you kind of think, this will be a hands off type thing?
Yeah, I mean, initially, yeah, it was. It's a long story about how we got to this point, but I did expect it to be a little less hands-on coming into this. Yeah.
So, just because taking a step back about you. So, tell us a little bit of your bio, your life story, and where we kind of get to this point in life.
Of course, yeah. Well, I was born and grew up in South Africa. Started playing football at probably the age of about 3. And obviously, like every kid, really, really loved it. At some point, probably at age 8 or 9, discovered a football magazine. And we got them in South Africa. I don't know if you got them in England, but Scorcher magazine, Score magazine, and there were some others. But discovered these things, and through that started following English football. In those days, which was in the 60s, South Africa had no TV. So South Africa only got TV in 1976. So there was no TV, there was no football coverage on TV or anything like that. So there was really no way to follow football, except through these magazines, which generally arrived about 2 or 3 weeks after the published date. So, I'd sit by the mailbox for a week or two waiting for the magazines to come and then just sort of devour them. But I grew up being quite passionate about football. I was a massive Leeds United fan because, in the early 70s with the Billy Bremners and the Jack Charltons and all those guys, they were a successful team. And so obviously a successful team is one that you pay attention to. I followed football, played football until probably age 16 or 17, and then came to the sad realization that my dream of being a pro footballer was not going to happen, and so went off and did my military training in South Africa. Came back, did my studies, and in 1986. I was lucky enough that the qualification that I did allowed me to go out into the world and sort of ply my trade. I eventually decided to come to the United States on contract with a chartered accountant firm because that was my qualification. Came over on a 2-year contract, and 35 years later, or 40 years later, I'm still here. But
do they know?
Yeah, they do.
Okay.
They finally found out. Yes, yeah. I'm a citizen now, so yes, they do know. Even in the US back in 1986, there was no coverage of English football, so I sort of lost touch with it at that point. And then in the mid 90s, I think there was some fairly spotty coverage. But I found it and devoured it and sort of raised my passion again. And coming back to it at that point, I was older and maybe a little bit more established financially as well. And so knowing that I was never going to be playing competitively again, I just really had this desire to be involved somehow in a football club. And obviously, English football was my passion, so that's where I wanted to be. So, over a long period of time, this process probably started in 2012, I think. Mm-hmm. And of all things, in 2012, I actually spent some time with Ken Bates in Monaco, and actually made a deal with him to invest some money into Leeds United.
Right.
Unfortunately, a few weeks after we made a deal, the deal changed, and we sort of walked away as friends, and didn't do that deal. But on that process, when I made a deal, came back to the US and called the British consulate and said, I'm trying to do this. Can you guys help? I need to speak to someone who is based in the US, but who knows English football very well. And they gave me the name of Gary Hopkins. And so I had contacted Gary at that time. And when that fell through, we got on really well. We became close friends. And we continued to look at football things together. And we looked at Coventry City a couple of times. Because Gary's from Coventry, I think that's probably why. But we tried very hard to get involved there as well, and weren't successful there. And come 2020 now, we had a couple of different people that were interested in looking at taking on investors. A couple in England and actually 2 in France as well. And so Gary and I had done a trip out to France and to Paris, and then to Normandy. Came back to London, looked at a few clubs in London, and while we were traveling, one of the lawyers that we'd been working with had called and said, there's this club called Sutton United, and they're looking for an investment, and you should talk to them. And we're like, well, who's Sutton United? Never heard of them before, unfortunately. So we were in London, and we had an evening spare, so we called and said, let's go have dinner. So we went and had dinner with Bruce and Adrian, and then with Martin as the MBuzz representative. And we just had a fantastic dinner. And it was just a beautiful evening. talked about football all night long, and just it was really, really nice. We just had a great time, and kind of came away from that meeting thinking, wow, that's really interesting, but it's really small. It's not Leeds United, and it's not Coventry City, even though as we come out,
I've noted this down.
Yeah, exactly. Which is sort of how the "if you can't beat them, join them" headline came, a year later. But came back to the US and thought, that was really fun, but it's really small. Is that really, is it something that's even worthwhile? And so I sort of had to sit back, I think, at that point, and take a big step back and say, okay, so why am I really trying to get into this? What is my goal in doing this? And after some soul searching, I sort of came up with that. I really wanted it to be enjoyable / fun. Not a huge amount of stress, and not a huge amount of financial pressure either. So yeah, I know you're laughing because
you've been stitched right up.
Yeah, I know, right? Exactly. But and if I when I took a look at it that way, and I looked at a team like Leeds United or a Coventry City under those under that umbrella, it really wasn't going to work for me, and it was probably a good thing that nothing ever happened there. But Sutton United really seemed to check all those boxes, and so we eventually contacted Bruce and said, okay, we'd like to do something, and it sort of went from there. So
beautiful. We'll come back to some of that, but one of the things is really interesting is the it sounds a long time ago, but 76, it's only not that long ago at all, everyone, shush. But you saying that, you had to wait for 2 weeks to get the magazines, and then we sort of fast forward to today, and we've got WhatsApp messages, we've got everything, and we know who was at training today and what was going on today, and all the rest of it. It's like, oh my God, you guys don't realise how lucky you are with the information you're getting so quickly. It's
unbelievable. Yeah. It really is, because there you were completely starved. You were at best you were 3 or 4 weeks behind everybody else.
Yeah,
but it didn't matter. I was 10 years old, so it just didn't matter.
When I was supporting Sutton United, unless you called this 0898 number, which is a premium rate number, you had to wait till the next day to get the results in the papers, and you're scouring all down the bottom of the papers.
Right, exactly.
I used to love it, because on Monday when people used to tease me that Sutton had lost, I was sitting there going, you had to really look for that. You had to see that. You had to search through.
Right.
Interesting that you mentioned Ken Bates, and you walked away as friends. I don't think an awful lot of many people walk away with Ken Bates as friends.
Well, I'm using the term loosely there.
Well, there's a story about Ken Bates. I'm not sure if Zoe will hear it, but Zoe, our goalkeeper, McNulty, had told me a great story that he took her down to the Chelsea megastore all those years ago when Ken Bates was there, and she was a baby, and Ken Bates picked her up, and she promptly did what babies do all over him. So her claim to fame is she threw up on Ken Bates. So,
I'm sure a lot of people have wanted to do that.
Absolutely. That would literally be on my CV. So you mentioned Gary and saying that he didn't potentially know Sutton United. I think he did.
I think because selective memory. I think
Yes. So my little curveball was I heard you were going to buy Leeds, but obviously you put that to bed. So obviously at the time Leeds were big. We played Leeds ourselves in the very early 70s. But you've mentioned kind of a little bit about the meal and meeting people. But what was it about the club that you went, you know what, I'm going to invest? Because to be honest, investing generally means you're going to get a return on
right.
it. Exactly. That's what most people mean by investment.
Exactly.
It's clear that football clubs are not overly the same, but what kind of drew you to Sutton in particular, other than just the people, and it was tiny?
I mean, I think it's the people. I mean, I think that's the bottom line is it was the people. I think it's really, I've been in business for a long time, and I think it's the most critical thing that you can have is be with good people. And so, yeah, that was really the number one issue. And I think that, the number two issue was that it was smaller and it wasn't a huge financial commitment. And theoretically, it was going to be fun as well. So,
It still is.
so yeah. No, it definitely, it's been amazing. Yeah, it definitely has. But yeah, I mean, and that was pretty much it. I didn't know much about the National League, but at the end of the day, it was a league. It was an English league. It was English football. There was, obviously promotion and relegation. So there was always that chance that we would get promoted into the EFL, which 6 months later we did. So, yeah, because to all of us, yeah. I mean, I invested in December of 2020, and May the next year we'd won the league. So
very good. So
yeah,
how does obviously with Sutton, and I say this lovingly, we kind of draw everything we can out of people and maximize their use. So what kind of as your experience, how has that benefited us or will benefit us in the future? What kind of?
Well, I think going in initially, at the time, essentially the club was fully a volunteer-run club. Last time in the National League, it was completely run by volunteers, and it worked great because obviously there wasn't a lot of income coming in to cover salaries and things like that. So from that standpoint, I think it was fantastic. And you had people who had been involved with the club for decades, many decades.
Yeah.
And so you had these people that were involved who are completely passionate about the club, and I think that's been a fantastic thing. Going into the EFL, it's a little bit different. You're up against some very, very big clubs with big budgets, and you sort of need to do everything you can to get as good a team as you can, and to get as a good an infrastructure off the field so that you can generate as much revenue as you can to pay those players. So it becomes sort of a vicious cycle. But I think the club, starting from the promotion, I think the club has had to grow up a little bit, and so we've had to take on full-time employees. And there's bringing Tim on as COO, I mean that's more than a full-time job, just taking care of all the administrative things. So there's just a lot, and you can't really expect volunteers to give 40, 50, 60 hours a week. Most of them have jobs and businesses, and so that's very difficult to do. So
yeah, absolutely. So when you first invested, as we said, the normal term of investment is I get something out of it. What were your initial expectations? Were you thinking, right, this is a 3-year investment, 5-year, 10-year, or was there nothing like that at all?
It was a long-term thing. To me, this I at least went in with my eyes open, knowing that generally football is probably one of the worst businesses in the world. I mean, you just if you get lucky and the team is successful and you get promoted a few times, then the value goes up, and maybe you make money that way. But on a year-to-year basis, it's very, very, very difficult to make money. Virtually impossible unless you have something magical happen. So I went in with my eyes open. I knew that it wasn't going to be a normal investment where you get a return on your investment and things like that. But the longer story is that when I invested, I really went in as a minority shareholder and put in a certain amount of money, and had a small percentage in the company or in the club. But when we got promoted, as has been well publicized, we needed to change the pitch, change the floodlights, change the ticketing system, add capacity, add some seating. There was all these things that had to be done, and there was just there was not money laying around in the club to do it. And I was fortunate enough to be in a position to fund a lot of that, and most of the other shareholders weren't. And so I did that. And so as I did that, it diluted everybody else. And so my percentage grew and grew and grew, and sort of over time has grown to a much more significant percentage. That wasn't part of the plan. It was the plan was to put money in, to enjoy the games, to come over once in a while, maybe twice a year, and watch some games, and just really enjoy the process. And it sort of got to the point where I was spending 8 to 10 hours a day working on it. And yeah, it's the most amazing business, because there's so many facets, as you well know, Mike. I mean, there's so many facets to the club, or any club. And for a small club like ours, with a relatively small amount of revenue, if you think about what we're doing, we've got a football team, we've got a women's team, we've got an academy, we've got juniors, we've got events business, we have a bar. We have, I could go on and on. So there's all these divisions that need people to run them, and so it takes a lot, and to sort of keep your fingers on all of those different things to make sure everything is going in the right direction. It takes a lot of time. So,
yeah, I mean, the word professionalism has been used a lot.
yes.
There's some things that I'm like, that shouldn't be happening at this club.
Yeah.
But I don't want that to stop, because I really like it. I love my little wandering around, and I can say, "Hi Gary, how are you?" Blah blah blah.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like there is nowhere else you can do this. So, but there's loads of things that obviously needs to happen. There's going to ruffle some feathers. I wasn't going to bring this up, but you know what? We're talking about it. They've given the curver to the away fans. So my spot where I've stood on all these years is not there. Well, it's there, but I can't get there anymore. So I'm over it. I'm fine. It's all right.
You probably could get there, but you just wouldn't want to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just my square off.
Yeah.
Were there any? Not horrendous. Don't drop anyone in it. But were there any sort of, once you did the investment, were there any little surprises that you were like, oh, hang on. I wasn't told that was part of the deal, apart from working 10 hours a day and been told, you've got to put more money in.
You're right. I mean, those were the surprises, really. I truly went in a little naive, thinking that you could just, you could, it was a club, it would run itself, and without any problems, sort of thing. That was a bit of an awakening. But other than that, no. I mean, I think as far as clubs go, because over time, as I said, we did look at quite a few different clubs, and Sutton United was about as clean as what I've ever seen.
I mean that's people are bored of me saying this, but for years and years and years, whenever I saw papers moaning that fans saying about other clubs they're run by a bunch of accountants, I'm sitting there going, how is that not a good thing? That's making sure you've got the money. I don't understand why you're saying that's wrong. As proven by the over-the-top reaction to the small HMRC thing that we had last year, everyone was freaking out about it. But that shows that it doesn't happen that often. So whilst it was an over-the-top reaction, it was quite good to know that actually we've never been here before. We've not had this.
Exactly. And that was, and then I probably shouldn't say too much, but I mean, that was just purely, we were expecting some money to come in. It didn't come in. I had already wired money to the club, but as you probably know, I mean, it takes, sometimes 3, 4, 5 days for wire transfers to go through from the US to the UK. And that was the problem. I mean, it just, it took a day too late, essentially.
We kind of guessed it was an oversight more than anything else, and obviously it's the cash flow situation.
Yeah.
So, as you mentioned, very shortly after you signed up, we went on an amazing run in that COVID season, and none of us got to see it, but we won the league. We were there for the last game. It's very surreal watching it all on little screens going, I'm supposed to be there. But We then got to the EFL, which is something that, as I was asked many times on different podcasts, is this what you dreamed of? And I was like, no, because
Right.
never believed it was going to happen. We were bobbing along quite happy. And then in our first season, we had that magical run to Wembley,
Right.
which kind of capped it all off. And we were 1 point away from getting into the playoffs, which would have been insane.
Unbelievable.
With the significant benefit of hindsight, do you feel that we were all a little bit guilty of, well, this is easy. We should have done this a long time ago.
Yes and no. I think, I think that first season was amazing, and it's sort of one of those things where adrenaline just seems to take over, and you don't even feel it, but suddenly you're way up there. I think that it's never as easy as what you think. And I think that even in League Two, I think year after year, the quality of football has improved. The amount of money that's being invested has improved significantly and gone up. And so that's obviously had an effect on the quality of football as well, the quality of the players that are playing at that level. And so, every year things have gotten a little harder and a little tougher. But I think you may be right. I think that, that first year, we obviously at the beginning we were scrambling to get the new pitch in and to get the stands done and things like that. But once things settled down, it really did seem easy. And beating League One teams in the quarter semifinals and things like that, it sort of seemed like par for the course. But thinking back, it was a huge deal. It really was. Yeah. And to me that to being a football nerd that I always was growing up, that day at Wembley to me was like made every sacrifice worth it. It was completely surreal. It was the most unbelievable day.
I hold some of the responsibility because I was behind our goal in my bright yellow jacket as the seconds were ticking away, and I just knew that if that final whistle went, I would be standing there in tears. And I was like, oh no, that's going to be the camera straight on me, the bald fat bloke crying. And I was like, and then literally I formed the thought and they scored. And I was like, no, go back. I'll cry for the camera.
Exactly,
I'll do it. But yeah, no, it was absolutely amazing. But we then went into the following season, which what I mean by that is we had some tweaks, but we didn't do an awful lot. And we possibly got found out. Now we're going to head into possible conversation of you may not be able to say too much. So if I do ask a question, you think, oh, you can say what you like, and we'll withdraw back. But for the want of a better term, the rot kind of started towards the tail end of the second season, and we just couldn't seem to get going. We had quite a big clear out, and we brought in quite a big number of names over the summer, which is partly why one of our conversations was delayed, because you were quite heavily involved with various things there. Did you ever get a sense of, and again, this is only thinking back, of some of these players maybe were thinking they're doing us a favour by coming to Sutton, or when did you start ticking that something wasn't clicking?
I think it might have been a bigger issue than that. I think that, we did have a big clean out at the end of the second season. Some of it, how can I put this? I think that Matt felt like there were a couple of players that stopped trying toward the end of the season, and they never came back. There were a few that for various personal reasons wanted to be elsewhere. And so, the result was a big clean out. And then, and going into that third season, and this was more probably on me than anybody else, but I really strongly felt that, we were getting Wrexham into the league, we're getting Notts County, we had some of those incumbent big clubs. I mean, the Gillinghams, the Stockports had, really big wage bills as well. And Matt came and said, I think that we need a bigger payroll, and I tended to agree with him, because I felt like to compete with these clubs, I felt like we had to be better than what we had been. And I think that the problem, I think what you said about some of the players maybe thinking they were doing us a favor, I think maybe one or two of them had that attitude. I think the problem was more that I think we got the recruitment wrong. I think that the recruitment, Matt played a very specific style of football, and I think the players we recruited didn't know how, whatever the situation was, how to play that way.
Yeah.
And I think it took us too long to get them to play the way that we needed them to play. And, the beginning of the season, to me, was just an absolute, well, most of the season was a disaster. There was just massive gaps everywhere. And the team weren't playing as a unit. They weren't moving as a unit. The forwards were moving forward and the backs were moving backwards, and there was huge holes in the middle. And it was just, and obviously you're playing against better quality opponents, and they were just exploiting that every time.
Yeah.
It was a very frustrating season, to say the least.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously, Matt's a really popular guy. He got us there. And to be honest, had he been bobbing along in the National League, hitting the playoffs every now and then, probably everyone would have been delighted. But as you said, that promotion changed everything.
Right.
Obviously, I don't want all the ins and outs because some of these conversations are private. But the decision has been put to us that it was a combined decision. When did conversations start happening, and can you share any more about how the decision was made? And was there a point that we said, okay, you've got this many games, or anything like the dreaded vote of confidence?
There was. So really the conversation started in September. I think it was mid-September, most likely. And as a board, we sat down and said, this is becoming an issue. We're not playing well. We're losing a lot of games. We collectively decided that we would, basically monitor it very closely and just see how things are going. But that seed had been planted at that point. And then we sort of went on that run of a bunch of draws.
Yeah.
And, some people were very excited that we were, hadn't lost. Others were not excited because we hadn't won. Some people are saying we're picking up points, and others are saying we're dropping points. And I was probably more on the latter. I was very frustrated that we couldn't win. And it sort of early December, it started getting very, very frustrating. To me, and this is my own personal opinion, the style that we were playing was just, it seemed to be getting worse and worse. It was like, you sort of go back to your basics when you don't quite know what to do. And I felt like we were getting the ball and just hoofing it up and hoping Harry Smith would somehow lay it off to somebody with, 4 players draped on his back. And I kept saying, hope is not a strategy, and that's our strategy right now. But, it started in early December. I think people started getting frustrated. And then when Stockport happened and we went away and lost 8-0, that was just a little too much to bear at that point. And there were conversations with Matt along the way. And, Matt, to his credit, stuck to his guns and said, I know how to win this way. And this is the way we have to play. And so, everyone put faith in him. And it just, for whatever reason, just didn't work. And so we just felt like at that point, we just felt like the way we looked, the way we were playing, there was just absolutely no way that we were going to win a game, and there was no way we were going to survive. So, to give ourselves at least some sort of fighting chance, I think we just had to do something.
So
I think I was going to say, I think Jason did a really, really nice job for us as a caretaker. I think it was really difficult for him because obviously him and Matt are so close. So I think he was really conflicted, but he was a true professional, and I think he did a really good job.
Yeah. So I'm a supporter of the club. Obviously, I like different people, but I support the club, and I'm like, well, this is the person in the job. There was a huge divide in the supporters, with lots of people saying no, he deserves to stay in post, and a lot of people saying, well, the board have made a mistake. This should have happened months ago.
Right.
Were you aware of that kind of stuff going on, or
Not really?
Not really. Okay. Do you
Yeah.
feel that possibly we delayed that decision out of loyalty a little bit too long, or are you happy?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. And look, and I blame myself for that one. I feel like at that point I was, I had a controlling interest in the club, and if I was a different person, I would have sort of shoved it down people's throats, but that's not me, and we have a board, and so we did it the right way, and just like there was a divide in the fans, there was a divide in the board as well, and but yeah, I think we did way too long.
Yeah. It's an unusual thing for the divide in the board, because I'm sort of told that generally most people kind of go, yeah, we know what the decisions are, so most decisions are generally just it's done. So
look, I mean, I think everybody, of course, everybody wants what's good for the club, otherwise they wouldn't be there. And I think everyone sort of votes with their hearts a lot. But I think I think there was a lot of loyalty to Matt as well, understandably so.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, absolutely. So relegation is a tough blow. There's no getting away from it. I mean, a little bit of me is looking forward to having a bit of fun and going to games and being able to do a proper smiley video at the end. But have you kind of gathered your thoughts on the relegation? Are you over it and back into come on, we're going to go again mode? Or
I mean, look, it's absolutely a bitter pill to swallow for sure. I mean, it was a tough one. It was a really tough one. There's a famous installment of the Ted Lasso show, which is that it's the hope that kills you. And I mean, we were all living that.
We know
went
that.
down to the last day, and maybe it's only 7 goals difference. There's got to be a way we can make it up. It was so.
Well,
but it was, it was tough.
Those things have happened. It wasn't the most bizarre set of circumstances that was needed to do that.
Right.
I didn't write this one down, but were you at all surprised by Steve's comments? I will be asking him this, of when he sort of afterwards was like, I failed. I failed the job. And I'm like, where we were and where we are. I know the outcome was relegation, but we didn't expect to get to the last day.
Right, exactly. I'm not surprised by Steve saying that, because that's the person he is.
Right.
He wants to he wants to go there and he wants to win. And he's to me, he's been fantastic. He's been absolutely just a breath of fresh air, and I think he's done fantastically well. I mean, if you look at it, I mean, the last 12 games, if we had done that all season, we would have been in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he completely changed the style, day one, changed the style of football. He got those players to be brave again on the ball, and, and things like that. So I'm forever grateful to Steve for what he did. And so, to answer your question about relegation and things like that, I think, yes, it was a tough one to take, but I think this is our opportunity in my mind. This is our opportunity to change things up a little bit, and by that I mean we've already basically implemented a lot of the stuff, but I think one of the mistakes that we made through the years is putting all the faith and the responsibility on the manager. And basically we had a manager who set the style of play, who did all the recruitment, who made all the decisions, and then when something like this does happen, you're sort of out there with nothing. And so, what we've done really now is as a club, we've sat down and we've designed the way that we want to play as a club. And that's going to be our philosophy. That's going to be the way that we play. And we will play that way. We will teach the academy to play in that same style. We'll recruit the manager and the players based on that style of football. And I think that's, I think it's a lot easier to make those kind of huge changes in the National League than it would be in League Two. So I think this is the time to do it. And so that's what we're going to do. I mean, you may have heard people talking about the data, the proprietary data management system that we've had designed for us. We've done phase 1. We're going on to phase 2 quite soon here. But that's been a godsend as well. I mean, I think that the way that recruitment worked for us in the past is that, we sort of heard a name of someone that sounded promising, and so a scout would, a month later, a scout would go out and take a look at him, and he wouldn't play that well, so maybe you'd take another look at him, and I think you'd go through 3 or 4 months going through that process. Whereas now what we can do is we can basically say we want a center back that's tall, good in the air, fast, whatever it is. And we have access to names of League One, League Two, National League North and South. We basically got a database of those players. And instead of taking 3 or 4 months to identify some people, we can do that with one click of a mouse. And so I think we've done that, and we've also now revamped and changed the recruitment system as well. Whereas there's not just going to be one person saying, I think that person's that player's a good player and I think he might suit us. We've now got, we've got a committee, we use data, we've got a whole checklist of things that have to be checked off on the positive, and, like the, medical records, character references, interviews, physical sort of data as well, running stats, all those kind of things. So we basically have a whole worksheet for each player. And he has to basically pass every single one of those items, and the whole committee has to agree that he's the right guy as well.
Wow.
So and I think I think that's why this year we've without being in a mad panic, we've had 13 signings already, and I think I hope very, very good signings. They're all young, energetic, progressive. So. I'm very, very optimistic and very excited for this season.
Yeah, and we only see snippets, but I've spoken to a lot of opponents' fans of the clubs we've signed them from. I would very much regret doing that because there was a lot more than I expected. But they all seem not just to tickle the on the pitch boxes, but they all seem like off the pitch as well.
Good guys,
hear good things about them, and obviously, that Mr. Salis would be involved with the whole thing with his "we not I, we not me," and the
right,
exactly.
And so on. No, exactly.
So afterwards, I might ask you, how does one get access to all this wonderful data? Because that sounds right up my geek street there. But we'll move away. So all the players and Steve have already said. So what's the goal here? Promotion. Is that the be-all, end-all goal, or is there going to be, okay, we're going for promotion, but we're happy with big progress and looking ahead?
I think for me personally, I don't think promotion is my biggest goal. I think that. I think all these other things are bigger goals. I think, setting a style of, getting the club set up so that we, if Steve, God forbid, left tomorrow, then we could find someone else. We know exactly what we're looking for. We can find someone else who will fit into that slot. We've got players that actually that slot into the way that we play as well. So I think, getting the club set up to be able to handle something like that, I think that's a big goal. I think the goal is to, I think values are a big thing, and I think if we can instill really good values into the club from top to bottom, to me that's one of the biggest goals, because I think if you can, do the right thing, and if you can do the right things the right way, on and off the pitch, I think success will come. And I think that's, to me, that's a bigger goal than just saying we want to get promoted, because that's that's sort of setting yourself up to fail, because, who knows? Harry Smith gets suspended for 6 games. You just don't, you can't plan for that.
No, absolutely.
So
one of my next questions was your outline your personal long-term vision. You've covered that. Sounds very much like the Southampton model, where the way they do it is you could theoretically take an under 10s and put them into the men's first team, and they know what they're supposed to do. So that sounds very much. Is it a case of, and being really harsh and business mercenary head, is it a case of we're looking to bring in players, develop, and sell them on to make a profit?
I think that that's not the goal. Mm-hmm. But I think that, I think that in recruiting such young players as we have, I think that is one of the pathways to maybe helping the club increase the income. If it comes to that, I mean, if it comes to making a decision, do we get promoted or do we sell a player? Well, clearly we're going to keep the player. But I think that is, part of a sort of the overall business model.
Yeah. This question probably is no good for you because I've actually got Matthew coming on. What kind of plans are there for expanding the commercial side of it? So you may have some insight, but I am going to speak to Matthew if you want to just defer.
Yeah, that's probably a Matthew question. I mean, that's we brought Matthew in because that's what he does, and mm-hmm. So I think that the stuff that we'd like to improve is the events. I think if we can, increase the number of events, maybe increase the quality of the space that we provide, and maybe the service we provide, and maybe increase the number, that would help. I think increasing the attendance, although being relegated probably doesn't do much for increasing the attendance, but if we can do the best we can, I think that through various promotions, through working in the community and things like that, I think that's a big goal. I think one of my biggest goals or one of our biggest goals I would like to see, and that's maybe a long-term goal, is the club being more involved in the community and doing more mm-hmm. community work. I know that that we have the foundation, which is doing some amazing stuff. But I think as a club, we may be falling short a little bit, and I think part of that is maybe having the players' training facility an hour and a half away. Mm-hmm. We're anxiously waiting for an announcement to come up relatively soon, which I'm quite optimistic that it will be quite soon. But I think that will be a huge help in enabling the players to get to hospitals, those kind of things. I think that's really would be a worthwhile goal for us. We've also, we actually have, a couple of really big announcements that will be coming soon. So it's an exciting time.
I love all that, the off the pitch stuff, the classic hospitals, the reading at schools. I think that's great. And I know a lot of the players, I know they give it like, oh, I don't want to do it, but you see them there and they're like, oh, this is great. I did a little thing for Bobby last year, and I was at the disability section with a couple of the players, and as I was walking behind them, I heard one of them say to me, well, you should get everyone else around here to do this because this is great.
Oh, really?
And I was like, yeah, that's what we need. Go on.
I heard that about that we did a couple of players did the Royal Marsden visit fairly recently, and I heard that as well. I mean, they really, really enjoyed it. Yeah. And that's something we want to expand as well, as that relationship, because they're right on our doorstep, so.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So again, I put this one down for you, but I think this is more of a Jack thing. So initiatives in place to engage the fan and expand the fan base. He's done some of that. I love Jack. Jack is the greatest. He's I sort of told him, I was with him the other day and said, I want people to pay attention. And they may criticize and may not like what you're doing, but as long as you get eyeballs, that's what's important. That's basically what he said. He doesn't mind annoying
he's great.
people as long as they interact with him.
Exactly.
I know you've hinted at a couple of things, but is there anything coming up that you can kind of give us an exclusive that we can look forward to? So I know we've got the new kit at some point. I think Jack might have been joking when he said I was going to model it. I hope Jack was joking when he said I was going to model it.
I hope he was too. I'm kidding.
And I know the training facility is there, but is it
so close? Yeah.
Is there anything we can kind of really get our teeth into and back as supporters?
Nothing that I could say right now.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I'm under strict embargo about that. But I will say, I mean, there are some announcements coming. We've got some, a relationship with someone who will be very exciting, I think, to everybody. And then the training facility, we can't announce anything yet. We're under embargo from the LBS actually on that, so don't want to say too much about that.
No.
But no, there are. I mean, you talk about long-term goals or long-term plans for the club. I think one of the biggest goals as well is to find a home for the club, essentially. Not the stadium, but I mean, for training. So, as you know, when we lost the 3G pitch at the stadium, the women's, the academy, everybody scattered and went wherever they could to find facilities. And we're still doing that, and we're living like nomads. And I think that at some point, I really would like to see a facility that houses, maybe the first team is training, and maybe the women's team and the academy, the college program, depending on how big this all is. And it's possible. I mean, right now it's the first team. It is possible that maybe we could expand that. But that really, I think, is a big goal, is to get one home for the club, so that we can have somewhere we can call home.
Yeah.
So.
Hopefully the LBS thing can get sorted soon, because it is the election, and there's a lot of stuff they can't do.
Right. Yeah.
It's can sway votes one way or the other. Right. One last thing before I let you go, and thank you very much.
Yeah.
It's a little apology, because we were having a very brief chat at the ground, and unfortunately I was sidetracked because I was minding Jenny as Jenny, and that was obviously a far more important job than my knowledge.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, so I did find out she was smiling under that costume, which I love. I love the fact she was smiling. It's like, you don't need to do that. But hopefully we will see you at ground soon. I can say hello properly. Thank you very much for your time. And
absolutely.
Everyone, this has been an episode of Sutton Podcast. I hope you've enjoyed it. Do let me know. Follow us, like, share at Sutton Podcast on social media, subscribe, and we will be back soon with another peek behind the amber curtain. I'm kind of doing these recordings at different times, so I can't tell you who's coming up next because I haven't actually decided the order. But I know this was episode number 1. I hope you've enjoyed the episode, and take care. We will catch up soon. Bye-bye. United!